Have you ever wondered if there's a secret language of wealth that only a select few are taught? A hidden code that could transform your financial life overnight? Picture this. The year is 1931, the heart of the Great Depression. Streets filled with desperate faces, broken dreams, and empty pockets. A young dancer, his body aching from performances that barely paid for a single meal a day, stumbles into a small, dimly lit room in Harlem. He's following a rumor, a whisper of a teacher who knows. Things about abundance, about the true nature of reality, about how to bend the universe to your will. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Has this ever happened to you? That moment when you feel drawn to something, someone, without knowing exactly why. When coincidence feels too shallow a word to describe the magnetic pull you're experiencing. As the broke dancer enters the room, the crowd parts. At the front stands a commanding figure, a man with skin as black as the ace of spades, wearing a turban, his eyes reflecting wisdom from ancient traditions. Before the dancer can even introduce himself, the turbaned man looks directly at him and says something that sends shivers through everyone. "Present, you're 6 months late. The brothers told me you would come." The dancer had never met this man before. How could he possibly know his name? How could he have been expecting him? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. It certainly surprised the dancer. This mysterious teacher, whom we now know as Abdullah, was exceptionally selective. Throughout his entire lifetime, he chose to share his most powerful secret with only 2 people. Just 2. And what happened to those 2 individuals? Both transformed from penniless seekers to millionaires. Both went on to influence millions with their teachings. One of them wrote what would become one of the most influential self-help books of all time. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. What was this secret that Abdullah guarded so jealously? What knowledge could be so powerful that it could lift a broke dancer from poverty to prosperity during the worst economic crisis in American history? What if I told you it wasn't a complex system, not a 12-step program, not even a book-length manuscript, but just 2 words? 2 words that, when understood correctly and applied precisely, can make money appear in your life in ways that will seem miraculous to those around you. 2 words that most people will hear and dismiss, but that the wise will recognize as the key that unlocks the vault of universal abundance. Ready to discover more hidden spiritual wisdom? Subscribe now and join thousands who are transforming their lives through these ancient teachings. Click the bell icon to continue this journey of awakening with us. 2 words. That's all it takes to potentially transform your entire relationship with money. But here's the revelation that changes everything. These words aren't spoken aloud. They're whispered to yourself in the sacred chamber of your own mind. Joseph Murphy was one of the 2 fortunate souls who received this hidden truth directly from Abdullah. His journey from that fateful meeting to becoming a renowned author is nothing short of extraordinary. The mindset shift he experienced became the foundation for The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, a book that has sold millions of copies worldwide and continues to impact lives nearly a century later. What's fascinating about Murphy's journey is not just his financial transformation, but the profound inner awakening he experienced. Before meeting Abdullah, he was trapped in what most would call reality, the limiting beliefs that keep us chained to struggle, that convince us abundance is for others, but not for us. But after embracing these 2 powerful words, his entire perception shifted. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to attract money effortlessly, how opportunities find them rather than them hunting desperately for opportunities? The difference lies not in external circumstances, but in internal programming, the hidden truth that shapes our relationship with abundance. The secret Abdullah shared isn't a magical incantation or a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a fundamental recalibration of your relationship with the universe itself. When Murphy silently repeated these two words with the proper understanding, he wasn't begging the universe for money. He was acknowledging a truth that had always existed. What's truly remarkable is how these words, when properly understood and silently repeated, can seemingly unlock channels of abundance that were previously invisible to you. Money doesn't appear from nowhere. It flows through synchronicities, unexpected opportunities, and solutions that simply weren't in your awareness before. But here's where most seekers stumble on their path to abundance. They treat spiritual principles like transactional formulas. They want guarantees, step-by-step instructions, cause and effect certainties. Abdullah knew better. He understood that the most profound revelations cannot be reduced to mechanical techniques. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic because understanding the precise method behind these two words makes all the difference between those who experience real transformation and those who dismiss it as fantasy. The difference between the 99% who try and fail and the 1% who implement it correctly and watch their lives change before their eyes. If you're resonating with what you're hearing so far, write "I'm ready for abundance" in the comments below. Here's the fascinating revelation about these two words. They are simultaneously the simplest and most misunderstood spiritual teaching ever shared. The statistics are staggering. 99% of people who discover these words will never experience their transformative power. They'll dismiss them as too simple, too strange, or too contrary to their current belief systems. They'll repeat them like empty affirmations, waiting for magic to happen, then abandon the practice when immediate results don't appear. But that crucial, 1%, those who grasp the authentic methodology behind the words, experience a complete paradigm shift. Their perception of reality fundamentally changes. Money worries that once consumed their thoughts simply dissolve. Opportunities that seem non-existent suddenly appear from unexpected directions. Joseph Murphy's journey exemplifies this profound metamorphosis. Before encountering Abdullah's teaching, he was just another struggling artist in Depression-era New York, his talents unrecognized, his future bleak. But through the consistent application of these two words with the correct understanding, his entire life trajectory shifted. What makes this revelation so powerful is that it doesn't require external validation. You don't need anyone's permission to implement it. The awakening happens within your own consciousness first, then materializes in your external circumstances. It's the ultimate journey of self-discovery, the hidden truth that has been veiled behind complex spiritual teachings for centuries. Don't miss our upcoming revelations about consciousness and abundance. Subscribe now and become part of a community dedicated to spiritual transformation. Your next breakthrough might be waiting in our next video. Murphy's fellow student experienced an equally dramatic transformation. Both men evolved from financial instability to abundance, from obscurity to influence. They didn't just accumulate wealth, they developed a completely new relationship with the concept of prosperity itself. The impact was so profound that both dedicated their lives to sharing variations of these teachings, though neither revealed the complete method until decades later. This isn't just about financial breakthrough. It's about the liberation that comes when you recognize your true relationship with universal forces. Most spiritual teachings focus on what you should do. Abdullah's approach was revolutionary because it focused on who you already are, a mindset revelation that changes Everything downstream in your life, the decisions you make, the opportunities you recognize, even the way you interpret challenges, all transform when you integrate these two words into your consciousness correctly. And yet, the practice itself is deceptively simple, so simple that most seekers believe there must be something more to it, some complex ritual or elaborate system hiding behind the curtain. Let me take you behind the scenes of what makes this work, where most people go wrong, and what distinguishes those who experience genuine breakthroughs from those who dismiss it as nonsense after a half-hearted attempt. If you're feeling a resonance with what I'm sharing, type "I choose abundance" in the comments below. The beauty of Abdullah's teaching lies in its immediate accessibility. Unlike mystical practices that demand years of initiation or complex rituals requiring rare ingredients, this method can be implemented the moment you truly understand it. There are no prerequisites, no special tools required, no certification programs to complete. This democratization of spiritual power is what makes it so revolutionary and potentially threatening to traditional systems of thought. What you're discovering here isn't reserved for spiritual elites or those with special gifts. It's available to anyone who approaches it with sincerity and proper understanding. The activation happens in real time, in the laboratory of your own consciousness, with results that often begin manifesting within days or weeks rather than years. To fully appreciate the impact of this revelation, we need to understand the depths from which Joseph Murphy emerged. Picture November 1931 in Harlem. Not the culturally vibrant Harlem celebrated in history books, but the Harlem crushed under the weight of the Great Depression. Streets once alive with jazz and optimism, now echoed with desperation. This was Murphy's reality. His dancing career, once promising, had ground to a standstill. Venues closed, audiences disappeared. The arts, always the first casualty of economic hardship, offered little opportunity. Murphy's living conditions reflected this brutal reality. A tiny, cold room barely large enough for a mattress. His daily sustenance had dwindled to a single meal, often just enough to keep hunger at bay, but never enough to truly satisfy. This wasn't temporary hardship or a challenging phase. This was destitution in its rawest form, the kind that grinds down hope and makes each day a battle for basic survival. Murphy later described this period as existing rather than living, his creative spirit and natural optimism nearly extinguished by constant worry about the most basic necessities. What makes Murphy's journey so compelling is that his transformation didn't require escaping these circumstances first. The profound mindset revelation happened while he was still in that tiny room, still struggling for his next meal. The inner shift preceded the outer manifestation, a critical insight for anyone facing challenges today. Many seekers make the mistake of thinking, "I'll adopt these spiritual principles once my situation improves." Murphy's experience proves the opposite pathway is more powerful. The situation improves because the inner transformation happens first, regardless of external circumstances. This catalyst for authentic transformation isn't dependent on your bank balance, your education level, or your social connections. The doorway to abundance exists in consciousness first, and Abdullah's teaching provided Murphy the exact key to unlock that doorway while still in the midst of overwhelming scarcity. Let me show you exactly how this inner alchemy works and why the precise method matters more than the words themselves. If what I'm sharing resonates with your spirit, type "I'm ready for the revelation" in the comments below. Imagine the scene that unfolded that fateful evening. Murphy, exhausted and hungry, follows a whispered recommendation from another struggling artist about a spiritual teacher who knows things. Not religious things or conventional wisdom, but hidden knowledge that seems to defy the limitations most people accept as reality. The gathering was small, held in a modest apartment rather than any formal venue. As Murphy slipped quietly through the door, hoping to remain anonymous in the back of the room, something extraordinary happened. The turbaned figure at the front, a man of commanding presence, with penetrating eyes, stopped mid-sentence. The room fell silent as Abdullah looked directly at Murphy. "You are 6 months late," he declared, his voice carrying both authority and a hint of amusement. "The brothers told me you would come." The impact of this statement sent ripples of astonishment through everyone present. Murphy had never met this man before. He had told no one of his plans to attend. The decision itself had been impulsive, made just hours earlier. Yet, here was Abdullah, speaking to him with the familiarity of an expected guest who had missed his appointment. More mystifying was the reference to the brothers, an unnamed spiritual fraternity that Abdullah occasionally mentioned but never explained. This mysterious brotherhood, according to the sparse details Abdullah ever shared, existed beyond ordinary physical limitations. They operated on higher planes of consciousness, guiding those ready for spiritual awakening to the right teacher at the right moment. This unexpected recognition created an immediate soul connection that transcended Murphy's skepticism. In that moment, something within him, call it intuition, higher consciousness, or simply a desperate hope, recognized an authentic spiritual authority unlike anything he had encountered before. What makes this initial meeting so significant isn't just its unusual nature, but how it demonstrated the very principles Abdullah would later teach. Before Murphy understood any specific technique, he witnessed firsthand that consciousness operates beyond the limitations of conventional space and time. Abdullah wasn't guessing or performing a trick. He was operating from a level of awareness where Murphy's arrival had already been perceived and expected. This revelation hints at a profound truth about our reality. What appears miraculous from one level of consciousness is simply natural law operating from a higher perspective. Abdullah's seemingly impossible knowledge demonstrated the very principles that would later transform Murphy's relationship with financial abundance. The journey that began with this startling introduction would unfold into a complete reconstruction of Murphy's understanding of reality itself. Before learning any techniques or methods, Murphy first had to witness the living embodiment of possibilities beyond conventional thinking. This pattern, experience first, explanation later, would become Abdullah's signature teaching style. Now, to understand the power of the 2 words I'm about to reveal, we must first grasp what Abdullah understood about the nature of consciousness itself and why most spiritual teachings fail to produce tangible results. If you've ever experienced moments of unexplainable knowing or synchronicity in your own life, type "consciousness is greater than logic" in the comments below. What's particularly fascinating about Abdullah's approach was his selective nature. While most spiritual teachers of the era sought large followings, Abdullah deliberately limited his inner circle. Beyond his work with Murphy, he maintained only one other significant student relationship, another seeker who would also go on to transform countless lives through his teachings. This exclusivity wasn't born of elitism, but of wisdom. Abdullah understood that profound spiritual truths, when diluted for mass consumption, often lose their transformative power. By working intensely with just 2 dedicated students, he ensured the integrity of his teachings remained intact. These 2 students formed a brotherhood of their own, each receiving slightly different aspects of Abdullah's wisdom, each destined to share these revelations with the world in their unique way. The impact of this strategy created a powerful ripple effect. Rather than directly teaching thousands, Abdullah created 2 perfect vessels who would eventually reach millions. A brilliant multiplication of influence that continues to resonate today through books, recordings, and the countless lives transformed by their work. Abdullah himself was a figure who commanded attention without seeking it. Those who met him invariably described him as black as the ace of spades, a phrase that reflected both his striking appearance and the era's limited vocabulary for describing skin tones. His complexion wasn't just dark, but radiated a depth that many associated with ancient wisdom traditions. The turban he always wore further distinguished him from other spiritual teachers in Depression-era New York. This wasn't cultural appropriation or theatrical costume. Historical evidence suggests Abdullah had authentic connections to North African spiritual lineages, where such headwear was traditional. The turban served as both physical marker and spiritual symbol, creating an immediate visual cue that the wisdom he shared came from traditions older and deeper than conventional Western thought. But what truly set Abdullah apart wasn't his appearance, but his presence. Those who encountered him described an unmistakable authority that required no validation from external credentials or institutional affiliations. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knows rather than believes, a living embodiment of the very principles he taught. This embodiment proved crucial to Murphy's journey. Before learning specific practices, Murphy first needed to witness the living proof that consciousness could operate beyond conventional limitations. Abdullah didn't just teach theories about abundance during economic depression. He lived in a state of unfailing provision when scarcity surrounded everyone else. Abdullah's teaching methods were as unconventional as his appearance. Unlike most spiritual instructors who eagerly explained their systems, Abdullah often refused to answer direct questions about how his techniques worked. This wasn't secretiveness, but pedagogical brilliance. He understood that intellectual comprehension often creates the illusion of spiritual progress without the actual experience. Let me show you how Abdullah's mysterious approach actually concealed a perfect system for transforming consciousness, one that begins with those two powerful words I promise to reveal. If you've ever felt drawn to wisdom that transcends conventional understanding, type ancient truth, modern application in the comments below. Recent historical investigations have peeled back layers of mystery surrounding Abdullah's identity. Most compelling evidence points to him being Dr. Modest Abdallah Gillam, a fascinating character whose journey embodied the global exchange of spiritual wisdom. Born in North Africa and blessed with a remarkable baritone voice, Gillam wasn't merely a spiritual teacher, but an accomplished musician whose talent granted him unique access to diverse communities across America. Before establishing his presence in New York, Gillam had created spiritual study groups along the eastern seaboard, particularly in Atlantic City. These weren't conventional religious gatherings, but intimate circles exploring consciousness principles that transcended religious boundaries. He brought with him a tapestry of mystical wisdom, threads of Sufism, Hermeticism, and indigenous North African practices woven with his own direct spiritual realizations. This multicultural background gave Abdullah's teachings a universal quality rarely found in Depression-era spiritual movements. While most American metaphysical teachers drew primarily from Christian or Eastern traditions, Abdullah presented principles that seemed to tap into something more fundamental, laws of mind that predated and transcended any particular religious framework. What truly distinguished Abdullah's teaching methodology was his resolute refusal to provide logical explanations. When students would ask the perfectly reasonable question, "How does this work?" Abdullah would respond in the most unexpected way. He would literally turn around, walk to his private room and close the door, sometimes with enough force to make his point unmistakable. Imagine the frustration this created. Students seeking rational understanding would find themselves facing a closed door instead of the step-by-step explanation they craved. This wasn't rudeness or secrecy on Abdullah's part, but profound pedagogical insight. he understood something most spiritual teachers miss. The analytical mind cannot grasp certain truths, because the very nature of analysis creates separation between subject and object. The revelation Abdullah offered required a unified consciousness, not dissection. By refusing to satisfy the intellectual mind's demand for explanations, he forced students into direct experience, the only true teacher of spiritual principles. This approach created an uncomfortable but necessary shift from knowing about to knowing from within. Murphy later described this as the most difficult and most liberating aspect of Abdullah's teaching. The discomfort of not receiving logical explanations pushed Murphy to seek understanding through application rather than analysis. Each time Abdullah closed his door, Murphy was forced to turn within, to test the principles through lived experience rather than mental gymnastics. This methodology reflects ancient wisdom traditions that understand transformation happens through embodiment, not information. Abdullah wasn't withholding knowledge, he was protecting it from the mind's tendency to convert living truth into dead concept. His closed door wasn't the end of teaching, but the beginning of revelation through direct experience. The quintessence of Abdullah's approach now brings us to the two powerful words that form the foundation of his entire teaching. Words so deceptively simple, yet profound, that they require this precise context to be properly understood and applied. If you recognize the limitation of logical understanding when it comes to spiritual transformation, type "experience transcends explanation" in the comments. What's particularly intriguing about Murphy's journey is the decades-long silence he maintained about Abdullah's core teaching. Throughout his prolific career as an author and lecturer, Murphy openly credited Abdullah as his primary influence and spiritual mentor. He frequently shared anecdotes about their encounters and acknowledged the profound impact Abdullah had on his understanding of consciousness and manifestation. Yet there remained a conspicuous gap in these public teachings, a deliberate omission of Abdullah's most transformative technique. In his best-selling books and packed lectures, Murphy would dance around this central teaching, sharing principles and practices that stemmed from it, without ever revealing the source methodology that made everything else possible. This wasn't casual oversight, but intentional guardianship. Murphy treated Abdullah's core teaching as sacred knowledge, not to be casually distributed to those unprepared to receive it. The same pattern appeared with Abdullah's other primary student, who similarly acknowledged Abdullah's influence while carefully avoiding disclosure of the central technique that had transformed both their lives. This shared silence creates a fascinating question. Was this secrecy demanded by Abdullah himself, or did both students independently recognize the potential for misunderstanding if the teaching was prematurely revealed? Historical evidence suggests both factors played a role. Abdullah had demonstrated through his own teaching style that certain truths require proper preparation. His students, having experienced both the power and the subtlety of his core teaching, understood the potential for misapplication. The veil of silence finally lifted in 1968 during an intimate gathering in Los Angeles. Murphy, by then an internationally respected spiritual teacher in his own right, made the momentous decision to reveal Abdullah's complete methodology. This wasn't a public event, but a private conference for dedicated students who had demonstrated both understanding and commitment to spiritual principles. The timing itself reveals a profound insight about spiritual transmission. Nearly 4 decades had passed since Murphy's initial encounters with Abdullah, 4 decades of integration, application, and personal verification of these principles. Only after this thorough embodiment did Murphy feel prepared to pass on the complete teaching rather than just its derivatives. Those fortunate enough to attend this historic gathering described a palpable shift in energy when Murphy finally spoke the 2 words that formed the foundation of Abdullah's teaching. One attendee later wrote, It was as though electricity filled the room. Not just the words themselves, but the consciousness behind them that Murphy had cultivated through decades of practice. The revelation marked a watershed moment in the transmission of this lineage of spiritual wisdom. What had been carefully guarded for nearly half a century would now begin its journey into wider awareness, though still protected from casual curiosity by the relative obscurity of the gathering itself. This brings us to the momentous revelation itself. The two words that Abdullah taught were the key to unlocking universal abundance and the precise method for their application that makes all the difference between failure and transformation. If you appreciate the sacred nature of wisdom that's carefully preserved until the right time, type "when the student is ready" in the comments below. The two words that formed the cornerstone of Abdullah's teaching, the secret that transformed Murphy from poverty to abundance and launched his legendary career, were simply this: I am God. Now, before you recoil at what might seem blasphemous or dismiss this as spiritual arrogance, understand that Abdullah's teaching operated from a completely different framework than conventional religious thought. This wasn't about claiming superiority or special status. In fact, it was precisely the opposite. What Abdullah revealed was a universal truth about the nature of consciousness itself, a revelation that dissolved separation rather than reinforcing it. When Abdullah taught "I am God," he was pointing to a fundamental realization that divinity isn't something external to you. As he explained to Murphy during their private sessions, God is not a person separate from you. God is your own individual consciousness. This perspective completely transforms the relationship between human and divine, from one of separation and supplication to one of recognition and embodiment. Think about the radical paradigm shift this creates. Most spiritual traditions position God as something outside yourself, a being to be worshipped, pleased, or feared. This externalization creates an inherent sense of separation, a gap between your current state and the divine. That gap, then, becomes the source of all sense of lack, limitation, and struggle. Abdullah's revelation collapses this gap entirely. If God is your own consciousness, the awareness in which all your experiences appear, then there is no separation to overcome, no distance to travel, no entity to please. There is only a truth to recognize about what you already are and have always been. This understanding predates Christianity by thousands of years and appears in various forms across numerous wisdom traditions. Inviting to the Upanishads, we find Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. In Egyptian mystery traditions, I am that I am. These weren't claims of personal divinity, but recognitions of the universal consciousness expressing through individual form. Exactly what Abdullah was pointing toward. The revelation creates a profound shift in your relationship with abundance. If God, the creative principle of the universe, is your own consciousness, then lack becomes an impossibility. Limitation becomes merely a temporary misunderstanding of your true nature. Abundance becomes your natural state, not something to attract or achieve. This perspective reveals why most manifestation practices produce limited results. When you approach abundance as something to attract from outside yourself, you're operating from a consciousness of separation, the very state that creates the experience of lack in the first place. Abdullah's teaching inverts this completely. Abundance doesn't flow to you, it flows from you as you recognize your true identity as the source. Murphy's extraordinary life transformation began the moment he truly grasped this principle, not intellectually, but as lived experience. The words themselves might seem simple, even jarring, but the consciousness shift they're designed to facilitate changes everything about how you experience reality. Now let me show you why simply repeating these words without understanding the precise method Abdullah taught almost guarantees failure, and exactly how to apply them correctly, to experience their transformative power in your own life. If this revelation is shifting something in your understanding, type "the source is within" in the comments below. Here's where most seekers stumble on their path to abundance. They encounter these two powerful words and immediately reduce them to a magical incantation. They repeat "I am God" with the same consciousness they might use when saying abracadabra or making a birthday wish. They treat these words as a formula to manipulate reality rather than a revelation about the nature of reality itself. This superficial approach inevitably leads to disappointment. After a few days or weeks of mechanical repetition with no visible results, they abandon the practice, concluding it doesn't work. But this conclusion reveals more about their misunderstanding than about the practice itself. The words were never meant to be a spell cast outward to change circumstances. They were designed as a key to unlock an internal recognition that automatically changes how you experience all circumstances. Think about the profound difference between these approaches. The person treating "I am God" as a magic formula maintains their existing identity while attempting to control reality from a position of separation. The person understanding Abdullah's actual teaching experiences a fundamental identity shift that naturally transforms their perception and experience of reality. One operates from ego, trying to acquire power. The other recognizes a truth that dissolves the very sense of separation, creating limitation. This distinction explains why Abdullah was so selective about sharing this teaching. He recognized that without proper preparation and understanding, these powerful words could reinforce spiritual ego rather than dissolving it, creating more separation rather than revealing unity. The revelation that changes everything is that Abdullah taught this practice as part of a complete system with 5 specific elements that must all be present for the transformation to occur. When Murphy finally disclosed the complete method in 1968, he emphasized that missing even one of these elements virtually guarantees failure, while mastering all 5 creates the same remarkable results demonstrated in Abdullah's students. Each element addresses a different aspect of consciousness, creating a comprehensive approach that bypasses the ego's resistance and plants the recognition directly in the subconscious, where all real transformation occurs. These elements aren't arbitrary spiritual practices, but precisely calibrated components of a unified system designed to facilitate a fundamental shift in your relationship with reality itself. What makes this approach so revolutionary is how it differs from conventional manifestation methods. Most techniques focus on changing your thoughts to change your circumstances, a surface-level approach that often produces temporary results at best. Abdullah's 5-element system targets the foundation beneath all thoughts, your core identity and perception of reality. Change at this level automatically transforms everything built upon it. The journey of understanding these 5 elements takes us behind the veil of ordinary spiritual teaching into the realm of direct experience that Abdullah prioritized above all else. Each element reveals another dimension of the practice that turns these 2 simple words into the most powerful, transformational tool you might ever encounter. If you're sensing the depth beneath these seemingly simple words, type "I recognize the difference" in the comments below. The first essential element of Abdullah's system is the correct understanding of what these 2 words actually mean. Without this foundation, the other elements cannot function properly, like building a magnificent structure on sand. When Abdullah taught Murphy to silently repeat "I am God," he wasn't encouraging spiritual arrogance or suggesting Murphy was somehow special or superior to others. Quite the opposite. He was pointing to a universal truth that applies equally to every person. The revelation is that infinite consciousness, the creative principle responsible for galaxies, quantum fields, and every manifestation in existence expresses itself uniquely as each individual. You're not special because you're God. You're special as God expressing uniquely through your particular form and perspective. Abdullah, explain this profound concept through a simple yet perfect metaphor that Murphy would later share in his teachings: the ocean and its waves. Imagine standing at the shoreline watching waves rise and fall. Each wave has its distinct shape, size, and duration. Each appears to be a separate entity with individual characteristics. Yet, what is a wave, really? Nothing but ocean temporarily expressing in a particular form. The wave isn't separate from the ocean. It's made of precisely the same substance. It doesn't contain a portion of the ocean. It is the ocean expressing as that wave. Similarly, you aren't separate from infinite consciousness. You're made of precisely the same substance. You don't contain a spark of divinity. You are divinity expressing as your unique human experience. This perspective creates a revolutionary shift. Most spiritual traditions position divinity as something partially within you, a soul or higher self surrounded by less divine aspects like body, personality, or ego. This fragmented view creates internal conflict and separation. Abdullah's teaching dissolves these artificial boundaries completely. All of you, including body, emotions, thoughts, and circumstances, is the one consciousness expressing perfectly as this unique pattern called you. The implications for abundance are profound. If you are the ocean, consciousness, expressing as a wave, individual, then all the ocean's qualities are inherently yours. Limitation becomes as impossible as a wave claiming it doesn't have enough ocean. Lack becomes as absurd as a wave, fearing it might run out of wetness. Abundance isn't something to attract, but your fundamental nature to recognize and express. This understanding completely transforms how you approach the practice. Without it, repeating "I am God" reinforces separation, an individual entity trying to claim divine status. With this understanding, the same words dissolve separation, recognizing the truth that has always been the case. The words don't create a new condition. They acknowledge an eternal reality that your limited perception has temporarily forgotten. Murphy's transformation began the moment this understanding clicked into place, not as intellectual concept, but as lived truth. The recognition created a vibrational shift that automatically began reorganizing his experience of reality, including his financial circumstances. This wasn't manifestation as most understand it, but revelation of what had always been true beneath the illusion of limitation. Let's explore the second critical element that transforms these words from intellectual assertion to embodied reality. If this ocean metaphor illuminates something for you about your true nature, type "I am the ocean expressing as a wave" in the comments. The second critical element of Abdullah's system might seem counterintuitive at first, yet it addresses one of the primary reasons spiritual practices often fail to produce tangible results. Abdullah insisted that the words "I am God" must never be spoken aloud, but only repeated silently within. This wasn't arbitrary spiritual protocol, but profound psychological insight about the different pathways to consciousness. When you speak any spiritual truth aloud, something fascinating happens immediately. Your analytical mind activates to evaluate, judge, and inevitably doubt what you're saying. The verbalization creates an automatic separation between you and the statement, positioning it as something external to be assessed rather than an internal truth to be recognized. The conscious mind, designed to distinguish self from environment, instantly creates resistance. This sounds crazy. People would think I'm blasphemous. This can't possibly be true. Silent repetition operates through an entirely different mechanism. When you repeat these words internally, they bypass the conscious mind's defensive barriers and plant themselves directly in the subconscious, the deeper level of awareness, where true identity and reality perception are formed. This isn't manipulation or self-hypnosis, but utilizing the natural architecture of consciousness to reintegrate a truth that the analytical mind has fragmented. Abdullah described this beautifully to Murphy, calling it the whisper that roars in eternity. This poetic phrase captures the paradoxical nature of silent repetition, though imperceptible to others and even to your own analytical mind. It reverberates through the deeper dimensions of your being with tremendous power. The silence doesn't diminish the impact, it amplifies it by directing the vibration exactly where transformation occurs. The journey from intellectual understanding to embodied reality happens primarily through this silent communion with truth. Murphy discovered that his initial resistance to the teaching dissolved not through argument or evidence, but through this gentle, persistent internal recognition. Each silent repetition bypassed his analytical objections and awakened something deeper, a resonance with truth that transcended logical barriers. This reveals why many spiritual seekers experience a gap between what they intellectually accept and what they actually manifest in their lives. Their conscious minds may embrace spiritual concepts, but their subconscious, where manifestation actually occurs, remains untouched by these surface acceptances. Silent repetition creates a direct pathway to update the subconscious operating system rather than merely installing new programs in the conscious mind. Imagine two different seekers practicing Abdullah's teaching. The first proudly announces, "I am God" to friends, posts it on social media, and verbally affirms it throughout the day. The second never speaks it aloud, but silently recognizes this truth in the quiet of their own awareness. The first creates constant resistance and separation. The second facilitates integration and embodiment. Same words, profoundly different results. Now let's explore the third element that transforms this silent repetition from mental exercise to consciousness revolution, the specific state of awareness where this practice becomes exponentially more powerful. If you appreciate how silence can sometimes communicate deeper truths than words ever could, type "the power of inner knowing" in the comments. The poetic phrase Abdullah used, "the whisper that roars in eternity," captures a profound truth about consciousness itself. What appears as a gentle ripple at the surface creates powerful waves in the depths. This understanding leads directly into the third essential element of his system, perhaps the most overlooked yet critically important aspect of the practice. Abdullah insisted that the silent repetition of "I am God" must happen in a very specific state of consciousness, what he called the drowsy state. This isn't the alert, active mind we use for daily tasks, nor the unconscious state of deep sleep. Instead, it's the liminal twilight zone between waking and sleeping, a unique neurological condition where the analytical mind temporarily goes offline while consciousness remains present. This drowsy state occurs naturally in two key moments of your day: the hypnagogic state as you're falling asleep and the hypnopompic state as you're waking up. During these transitional phases, your brainwaves shift from beta to alpha and theta patterns. The conscious mind's constant analysis and judgment temporarily suspend, creating an open doorway between conscious and subconscious awareness. Why is this state so crucial for transformation? Because your analytical mind, the very faculty that creates the experience of separation, steps aside, allowing truth to plant itself directly in the fertile soil of your deeper awareness. Abdullah would say, God speaks in the silence between your thoughts, not in the noise of your mental chatter. The drowsy state creates precisely that silence, a temporary pause in the Mind's constant commentary. Murphy discovered the revelation of this approach through direct experience. After initially practicing the silent repetition throughout his day with minimal results, he followed Abdullah's specific instruction to focus on those drowsy moments between sleep and wakefulness. The transformation accelerated dramatically because these practice moments bypassed his rational objections entirely. This explains why many meditation and manifestation practices produce limited results. They occur when the analytical mind remains fully active, creating a constant undercurrent of doubt and separation that counteracts the very state they're attempting to achieve. The drowsy state elegantly sidesteps this obstacle by utilizing natural brain rhythms that temporarily suspend the critical faculty. Besides these natural transitional states, you can also access this receptive consciousness through deep meditation or self-induced relaxation. The key indicator isn't sleepiness, but the quality of mental silence, that spacious awareness where thoughts slow down and the gap between them expands. This is when your consciousness is most receptive to fundamental reprogramming. Think about the implications for your relationship with abundance. Most people try to solve financial challenges with the same analytical mind that created those limitations in the first place. Abdullah's approach offers a completely different pathway, accessing the subconscious architect of your reality through these drowsy state moments when the blueprints can be directly revised. Let me share how the fourth element transforms this practice from mechanical repetition to embodied knowing. The crucial distinction that separates those who merely practice techniques from those who experience genuine transformation. If you've ever noticed insights or solutions appearing during those twilight moments between sleep and wakefulness, type "wisdom comes in the spaces" in the comments. Abdullah's insight that God speaks in the silence between your thoughts reveals a profound truth about spiritual awakening. Most seekers focus on generating specific thoughts, believing transformation comes through thinking the right things. Abdullah recognized the opposite. Divine communion happens not during thought, but in the gaps between thoughts. These silent spaces aren't empty but pregnant with the unmanifest potential from which all creation emerges. This understanding shifts the entire approach to spiritual practice from an assertive, thought-based methodology to a receptive, awareness-based experience. Instead of trying to force specific mental constructs, you learn to cultivate the silence in which deeper truth naturally reveals itself. Murphy described this as the most counterintuitive yet liberating aspect of Abdullah's teaching, realizing that less mental effort creates more transformative power. Now, this leads us to the fourth essential element that distinguishes masters from beginners, the crucial shift from intellectual concept to embodied knowing. When practicing the silent repetition of "I am God" in the drowsy state, Abdullah insisted that success depends not on thinking the statement, but feeling its truth in your body. This distinction changes everything. Most spiritual seekers remain trapped in the realm of concept, intellectually accepting ideas without incorporating them into their felt experience. They think spiritual truths rather than embody them. Abdullah's fourth element transcends this limitation by anchoring recognition in physical sensation rather than mental abstraction. When you repeat "I am God" with the correct understanding, in silence, during the drowsy state, there should be a distinct bodily response, what Murphy called truth recognition in the flesh. This might manifest as warmth spreading through your chest, a feeling of expansion beyond physical boundaries, a profound sense of relief, or what many describe as coming home to yourself. The specific sensation varies between individuals, but its quality is unmistakable, a visceral knowing rather than intellectual hoping. This embodied recognition transforms the practice from aspirational to conformational. You're not trying to convince yourself of something that might eventually become true. You're recognizing something that has always been true, but temporarily forgotten. It's the difference between a stranger attempting to memorize your face and you recognizing yourself in a mirror. One requires effort, the other is instantaneous and effortless. Murphy's breakthrough came precisely through this distinction. After intellectually accepting Abdullah's teaching, he struggled with consistent results until experiencing this bodily recognition. During one drowsy state practice, the truth suddenly clicked into place, not as concept, but as felt reality. Murphy described a warm current flowing from my core outward and boundaries dissolving into light. Within days, unexpected financial opportunities began appearing in his experience. This embodied approach explains why some practitioners seem to manifest abundance effortlessly, while others struggle despite following similar techniques. The difference isn't in the words or methods, but in the consciousness from which they operate, conceptual understanding versus embodied knowing. If you've ever experienced a moment when something shifted from intellectual understanding to knowing in your bones, type embodied truth in the comments. The recognition of your true nature isn't just an abstract concept. It creates distinct physical and emotional signatures in your experience. Murphy described several common sensations that accompany this remembering. Many people notice a warmth that begins in the heart center and radiates outward, as though truth itself has a thermal quality when recognized by the body. Others experience a remarkable feeling of expansion, as though the boundaries that seem to separate them from everything else suddenly become permeable or dissolve entirely. Perhaps most profound is what spiritual teachers across traditions have described as coming home, a sense of remembering something you've always known but temporarily forgotten. This isn't discovering something new, but recognizing something eternal. The relief and peace that accompanies this recognition often brings tears, not from sadness, but from the profound release of finally putting down a burden you never needed to carry. What's fascinating about these physical responses is their universality. People from entirely different backgrounds with no knowledge of each other's experiences report strikingly similar sensations when this recognition occurs. This suggests we're not dealing with subjective imagination, but with the body's natural response to truth recognition, a kind of biofeedback that confirms alignment with reality rather than distortion. Now, this embodied recognition leads directly to the fifth and perhaps most revolutionary element of Abdullah's teaching, understanding abundance as natural consequence rather than forced outcome. This distinction completely transforms how you relate to manifestation itself. Most approaches treat abundance as something to be attracted, achieved, or manifested through specific techniques or rituals. Abdullah taught precisely the opposite. Abundance naturally flows when you recognize yourself as its source. This shift changes everything about your relationship with money and prosperity. Instead of trying to attract money from outside yourself, you recognize that as infinite consciousness expressing individually, you are the source from which all abundance flows. Financial improvement doesn't come to you from external sources. It emerges through you as you recognize your true identity. The metaphor Abdullah used with Murphy illustrates this perfectly. You don't attract water by chanting or visualizing. You dig a well to access what's already there. Similarly, you don't attract abundance through techniques. You remove the false beliefs that block your natural expression of it. The well digger doesn't create water, but accesses what already exists beneath the surface. You don't create abundance, but allow what's already your nature to express itself without obstruction. This perspective explains why Abdullah would abruptly walk away when students asked how his techniques worked. The very question reveals the fundamental Misunderstanding, treating abundance as something to be manipulated through external methods rather than expressed through internal recognition. Once you truly know who you are, the hows organize themselves without effort or manipulation. Murphy's transformation began the moment he shifted from seeking financial improvement through external means to recognizing himself as the expression of the source of all abundance. Opportunities didn't come to him. They emerged through him as natural expressions of his recognized identity. Let's explore a real-world example of how Murphy applied these 5 elements to manifest a seemingly impossible desire during the depths of the Depression. If you've experienced moments when something wonderful appeared in your life without struggle or manipulation, type natural abundance in the comments below. This perspective shift completely transforms how you experience opportunities in your life. Most people perceive opportunities as external events that either happen to them or don't, random occurrences they hope to attract through various techniques or efforts. Abdullah's teaching inverts this understanding entirely. Opportunities don't appear from outside. They're expressions of possibilities that already exist within consciousness, waiting to be recognized and actualized through awareness. Think about the revolutionary implications of this shift. Instead of scanning the horizon for opportunities that might come your way, you begin to recognize that all potential paths already exist within the infinite field of consciousness that you are. The question isn't whether opportunities exist, but whether your current level of awareness allows you to perceive them. As Murphy discovered, when your identity shifts from separated individual to expression of infinite consciousness, your perception expands to recognize possibilities that were always present, but previously invisible to your limited awareness. This explains one of Abdullah's most puzzling behaviors that initially frustrated Murphy but later revealed profound wisdom. Whenever Murphy or other students would ask Abdullah to explain exactly how these principles worked, the mechanisms or techniques to manifest specific outcomes, Abdullah would abruptly turn around, walk to his room and close the door, sometimes with enough force to make his point unmistakable. This wasn't rudeness or secrecy, but brilliant teaching through demonstration rather than explanation. Abdullah understood that how questions come from a consciousness of separation, treating manifestation as a technique to manipulate external reality. Once you truly recognize who you are, methodological questions become entirely irrelevant. The means of manifestation naturally organize themselves when consciousness is properly aligned with truth. Murphy's journey illustrates this perfectly. His early interactions with Abdullah were filled with frustrated, "But how exactly does this work?" questions. Each time, Abdullah would refuse to explain, forcing Murphy back into direct experience rather than intellectual understanding. Eventually, Murphy grasped that his very desire for methodological explanations was the obstacle to his transformation, the mind wanting techniques to control reality rather than recognizing itself as the source of reality. The liberation that followed this understanding was profound. Murphy discovered that once he truly embodied the recognition, "I am God," the pathways to his desires organized themselves without his need to manipulate circumstances or follow specific formulas. Synchronicities replaced strategies. Recognition replaced effort. Being replaced doing. This perspective explains why most manifestation approaches produce inconsistent results at best. They operate from the fundamental misunderstanding that techniques can bridge the gap between you and what you desire. Abdullah's revelation eliminates the gap entirely by recognizing that desire itself is the expression of infinite consciousness, which you are, seeking to experience itself in a particular form. Let me share a remarkable real-world example of how Murphy applied these 5 elements to manifest what seemed impossible during the depths of the Depression. a journey that perfectly illustrates the power of this approach. If this distinction between techniques and recognition resonates with your experience, type "being precedes doing" in the comments below. Here's where we reach the heart of Abdullah's teaching, the fundamental distinction that separates those who experience transformation from those who remain stuck in limitation. Most people who encounter spiritual practices like "I am God" unconsciously treat them as sophisticated forms of begging. They repeat affirmations with an underlying consciousness of lack, essentially pleading, "Please make this true for me," or "I hope this works." Abdullah's revolutionary insight was recognizing that this approach reinforces the very separation it attempts to overcome. When you treat "I am God" as a request or petition, you're implicitly positioning yourself as a limited entity seeking connection with something greater outside yourself. This stance of separation automatically creates the experience of lack, because it affirms a gap between your current state and what you're trying to become. The authentic application involves a complete paradigm shift, from petition to recognition, from becoming to being, from acquiring to remembering. You're not asking for something absent, but acknowledging something eternally present that has been temporarily forgotten through identification with limited perspectives. The statement functions not as magic words to manifest a new condition, but as a key unlocking awareness of what has always been true. Think about the profound difference in consciousness between these two approaches. The person treating "I am God" as a request remains in a state of seeking, striving, hoping, evaluating results, constantly reinforcing their current identity as separate from what they desire. The person understanding Abdullah's actual teaching experiences recognition, an aha moment of remembering their true nature, which automatically dissolves the sense of separation, creating limitation in the first place. This shift represents the essence of spiritual awakening across traditions, moving from the journey of the seeker to the recognition of the finder. It's the difference between climbing a mountain to reach a destination and realizing you've been standing on the summit all along, with clouds temporarily obscuring your view. The revelation doesn't create a new condition, but removes the distortion, preventing clear perception of what already is. Murphy's transformation accelerated dramatically when he grasped this distinction. His early practice involved repeating "I am God" while subtly hoping it would eventually become true, essentially treating divine identity as a future state to achieve rather than a present reality to recognize. Everything changed when Abdullah corrected this misunderstanding, helping Murphy shift from affirmation to acknowledgement, from future tense to eternal present. This perspective illuminates why abundance flows naturally from this recognition. When you truly know yourself as the expression of infinite consciousness, lack becomes as impossible as a wave running out of ocean. You don't manifest abundance through techniques or attract it from outside. You express it naturally as your fundamental nature. Financial improvement doesn't happen to you, it happens through you as the false limitations created by misidentification dissolve. Let me show you exactly how Murphy applied this understanding to manifest what seemed impossible during the depths of the Great Depression. A real-world demonstration that reveals the practical power of this perspective shift. If you've experienced the difference between seeking something and simply recognizing what's already there, type "recognition, not petition" in the comments. By December 1933, Murphy had been studying with Abdullah for about 2 years. While he had experienced notable improvements in various aspects of his life, he now faced a desire that seemed virtually impossible given the economic realities of the Great Depression. As Christmas approached, a profound longing to visit his family in Barbados consumed his thoughts. Having not seen them for years, this reunion felt essential to his heart, yet financially it appeared completely out of reach. The journey would require substantial funds for transportation across thousands of miles of ocean at a time when Murphy could barely afford his daily meals. International travel during this era was expensive even for the middle class, let alone a struggling dancer with empty pockets. The situation presented the perfect crucible to test whether Abdullah's teaching worked only for small manifestations or could indeed overcome seemingly insurmountable financial barriers. When Murphy approached Abdullah about this heartfelt desire, he phrased it in what seemed like perfectly reasonable language. "I really want to go to Barbados for Christmas to see my family, but I don't have any money. How can I apply these principles to make it happen?" Abdullah's response was immediate and firm, a classic demonstration of his uncompromising teaching style. "You don't speak of wanting to go," he corrected. Sharply, "You have already gone." This linguistic adjustment wasn't mere semantics or positive thinking. It reflected a fundamental consciousness shift that forms the core of Abdullah's teaching. Speaking of wanting, something automatically affirms its absence from your current experience, reinforcing separation between you and your desire. This creates the very gap you're trying to overcome. When Murphy attempted to discuss potential strategies or timelines, essentially asking for the film, "How?" Abdullah reverted to his signature response. He turned around, walked to his room, and closed the door. This wasn't rejection, but redirection, forcing Murphy away from mechanical techniques and back to the essential recognition that transcends methodology. With the door firmly closed to methodological questions, Murphy had no choice but to apply the complete 5-element system exactly as taught. He began silently repeating, "I am God," during those drowsy states between sleep and wakefulness. But now, following Abdullah's correction, he simultaneously held the consciousness of already being in Barbados rather than wanting to go there. This subtle but profound shift moved his practice from affirmation to recognition, from future desire to present reality. Instead of visualizing a journey he hoped would happen, Murphy experienced himself as already there, feeling the tropical breeze, embracing family members, and walking familiar childhood paths, all from the consciousness that as infinite awareness expressing individually, he transcended physical limitations of space and time. The journey that followed perfectly illustrates the transformation that occurs when conceptual understanding becomes embodied knowing. If you've noticed how your language often reveals your true beliefs about what's possible in your life, type "My words create my reality" in the comments below. Murphy diligently applied Abdullah's complete system with unwavering commitment. Each night, before sleep and each morning upon waking, he would silently repeat, "I am God," while simultaneously experiencing himself already in Barbados. This wasn't hopeful visualization of a future event, but full sensory immersion in a present reality, feeling the island breeze on his skin, hearing familiar voices, smelling the distinct tropical fragrances of his childhood home. What makes this practice so different from conventional visualization techniques is the consciousness behind it. Murphy wasn't imagining a separate self eventually arriving at a distant destination. He was recognizing that as infinite consciousness individualized, he transcended physical limitations, already encompassing both his current location and Barbados simultaneously. The visualization wasn't creating something new, but recognizing what already existed in the infinite field of all possibilities. For approximately 3 weeks, Murphy maintained this practice with disciplined consistency. He didn't obsess about mechanisms or constantly check for results, another crucial distinction from typical manifestation approaches. Instead, he simply held the recognition each morning and evening then went about his day from this shifted identity rather than from his previous consciousness of limitation. Then, on December 4th, the bridge of incidents manifested. Murphy received an unexpected letter from his brother in Barbados, a brother he hadn't heard from in over a year. Inside was $50, a substantial sum during the Depression, and a steamship ticket to Barbados. The letter explained that his brother had experienced a sudden, inexplicable urge to send for Murphy, feeling strongly that he should be home for Christmas, despite having no knowledge of Murphy's desire. What's particularly revealing about this manifestation is how it arrived through seemingly ordinary channels. No money magically appeared under Murphy's pillow, no stranger approached him with a ticket. Instead, the infinite intelligence, expressed through what appeared to be normal human impulses and decisions, his brother's sudden inspiration to reach out and send funds. This pattern reveals how manifestation typically unfolds, not through supernatural violations of natural law, but through the orchestration of seemingly ordinary events aligned perfectly with your recognized state of consciousness. The channel appears normal, the timing and specificity reveal the extraordinary orchestration behind the scenes. But the story doesn't. And there, the most convincing aspect of this manifestation was yet to unfold, a detail that couldn't be dismissed as mere coincidence and that perfectly illustrated Abdullah's teaching about recognizing rather than acquiring divine identity. If you've ever experienced an unexpected solution arriving through seemingly ordinary channels just when you needed it most, type "divine orchestration" in the comments below. When Murphy arrived at the steamship terminal, he discovered that the ticket his brother had sent was for the most basic accommodation, third class, located in the depths of the ship, with shared quarters and minimal amenities. While deeply grateful for the opportunity to travel at all, he accepted this arrangement without complaint, recognizing it as the perfect reflection of the consciousness from which he had been practicing. Upon checking in, however, something extraordinary unfolded. The booking agent looked up from his papers with a perplexed expression and informed Murphy that a last-minute cancellation had occurred in first class. Due to this unexpected vacancy and some administrative decision he couldn't explain, Murphy was being upgraded to this premium accommodation at no additional cost. This remarkable detail wasn't merely a pleasant surprise, but a profound revelation about how consciousness manifests. During their previous conversations about the trip, Abdullah had made a curious statement that initially confused Murphy. "You will sail first class." Abdullah had insisted, despite knowing Murphy's financial limitations made such luxury impossible. When Murphy questioned this assertion, Abdullah simply repeated, "When you travel to Barbados, you travel first class." Now, standing at the counter with his unexpected upgrade, Murphy understood. Abdullah wasn't making a prediction based on current circumstances or possibilities. He was speaking from the recognition of Murphy as divine consciousness individualized, for whom limitations exist only in appearance, never in reality. The upgrade wasn't luck or coincidence, but the natural expression of the consciousness Murphy had embodied through correct practice. This experience transformed Murphy's understanding forever. He witnessed firsthand that consciousness doesn't just manifest the minimum requirements to fulfill desires, but expresses with abundance beyond conventional expectations when you truly recognize your divine identity. The journey that began in a tiny Harlem room culminated in first-class passage across the Atlantic, a living demonstration of Abdullah's teaching that transcended intellectual understanding. The power of this teaching is available to anyone willing to apply the 5 elements with proper understanding and commitment. Begin by creating the appropriate conditions. Find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed. Take 3 deep breaths to center yourself and close your eyes to minimize external distractions. Then silently repeat, "I am God," not as a magic formula or desperate plea, but as recognition of what has always been true about your fundamental nature. Remember that you're not asking for something you lack or hoping to become something you're not. You're acknowledging what has always been true beneath the temporary forgetting that creates the appearance of limitation. This practice isn't about inflating your personal importance, but recognizing that the same infinite consciousness that creates galaxies and moves planets is expressing uniquely as you in this moment. If you sense the profound simplicity of this practice calling to something deep within you, type "The recognition is already within me" in the comments below. As we come to the end of this journey together, I want to thank you for exploring these profound spiritual principles with such openness. What we've discussed today isn't just ancient wisdom. It's a living truth waiting to be recognized in your own experience. If you found value in Abdullah's teaching and want to continue discovering these hidden spiritual principles that transform life from the inside out, consider joining our community by subscribing. Each week, we explore another dimension of consciousness that conventional teachings often overlook, but that holds tremendous power when properly understood. The recognition we've discussed today is just the beginning. There are countless other revelations waiting to be rediscovered, wisdom that has been guarded and preserved by teachers like Abdullah specifically for those ready to receive it. If this teaching resonated with your inner knowing, if you felt that recognition stir within you, I'd love to hear about it. Simply write, "I recognize the truth within," in the comments below. Your experience might inspire others who are on the same path of remembering rather than becoming. And if you found this exploration valuable, a simple like creates ripples that help others discover these teachings when they're ready. Every spiritual truth finds those prepared to receive it at the perfect moment. Your like might be the bridge that connects someone else to their moment of recognition. Right here beside this video, you'll find another exploration that builds upon what we've discovered today, a deeper revelation about how consciousness creates reality. Click through when you're ready to continue this journey of remembrance together. Until next time, remember, the truth isn't waiting to be created, it's waiting to be recognized.